Look at the heavy, structured stone of this coastline. For a woman named Catherine Hargrove, standing on the deck of a returning ship in 1964, this was the site of safety. To her, this gray, predictable landscape was a refuge that demanded nothing and asked no questions. But the relief was an illusion. 8,000 miles away, in the kitchen of an abandoned Indian farmhouse, Catherine had left behind a ledger of her life. She sealed her diary in a cavity behind the stone wall, a physical record of the guilt she spent 15 years trying to outrun. Outside that farmhouse, her secrets had taken a physical form. This orchard grew to an unnatural size because Catherine had fed it her shame every morning for a decade and a half. These trees thrived on the unspoken trauma of a burial ground that had never been given its proper rights. Catherine believed she could neutralize her past through distance. But a secret doesn't vanish just because you leave the country. It simply remains in the dark, growing stronger while you aren't there to watch it. This bustling London intersection represents the world Catherine's son, Marques, inhabited. It is a reality defined by modern administration and municipal order, a world that felt entirely disconnected from the hills of the Northeast. Marques's understanding of India was built on a curated fiction. He knew only the country his mother described in letters, a land of misty hills and morning birds, and the carefully selected books sent by a father he barely remembered. That separation began to dissolve when Marques married Lathika. As an Indian woman, her connection to the subcontinent created a bridge back to the very ground Catherine had tried to abandon. Catherine's silence was intended to protect her son, but it had the opposite effect. By keeping Marques in the dark, she ensured he would one day walk his own family back toward the danger he didn't know existed. In the decades following Indian independence, strict property laws made it nearly impossible for a British citizen to hold on to foreign land. As this diagram shows, Catherine was facing a series of legal barriers that threatened to force her to sell the estate she had named Checkpoint. But Lathika's citizenship provided an unexpected legal loophole. Suddenly, the property could stay in the family through a frictionless transfer of ownership, allowing Catherine to keep the land without ever having to return to it. To Catherine, this was a mundane victory of financial planning. She could settle her affairs and secure her son's inheritance through a simple administrative maneuver. The irony is that this shrewd bit of paperwork did more than save an asset. It permanently tethered her innocent heirs to a piece of ground that was still waiting for a reckoning. Inside their London home, Lathika began a quiet cultural reintegration. She introduced her children to the food, languages, and traditions of a country they had never visited, filling the house with a sense of Indian heritage. Her primary lesson to her daughter Eleanor was that land carries the history of what happens on it. She taught her that the ground itself holds memories that demand to be respected and known. While Eleanor listened to the land in London, the orchard roots in India were expanding aggressively through the soil of a forgotten burial site. The ground was literally choking on the weight of its own unrecorded history. Lathika believed she was teaching her daughter to honor her heritage. She didn't realize that by instilling this reverence for the land, she was giving Eleanor the curiosity required to seek out the very hillside Catherine had fled. Catherine took her secrets to the grave in 1981. She left her family with a clean financial title to the estate, but she also left the hidden diary as the only warning for what was buried there. By the time Eleanor reached adulthood, she had become a researcher who synthesized Catherine's analytical mind with Lathika's cultural intuition. Eleanor specialized in memorial landscape trauma, studying the stories people tell about land that has witnessed terrible events. She was a professional at uncovering the things people try to bury in the soil. This silence didn't destroy the truth. It created a gap in the family story. For a researcher decoding how landscapes hold on to trauma, the Checkpoint estate wasn't a financial asset, it was an unsolved case file. The investigation began when Eleanor found her grandmother's fragmented notes. To her, these weren't just old memories, they were a primary source describing a site that had never been documented. Looking at this map, we see how the 1964 escape route functioned like a tensioned rubber band. By 1994, that tension was snapping back, pulling Eleanor from London directly to the coordinates of the Checkpoint farmhouse. A deed is the physical ledger of a family's unresolved history. You can cross an ocean to escape the past, but if your name is on the title, you are the one the land will eventually come to for its debt.